Elena Voss had always believed that love was a luxury her pack could not afford. She stood at the edge of the Ashwood forest on a cold morning, watching the last healthy tree drop its leaves too early. The ground was dry and cracked. The river that once ran clean through their territory now moved slowly, thick and dark. 3 children in the pack had fallen sick that month. 2 elders had stopped shifting altogether. When a wolf could no longer shift, it was the beginning of the end. Her father, the beta of Ashwood pack, sat at the long wooden table in their pack hall that evening, with his hands folded and his eyes low. Around him sat the elders, quiet and heavy-faced. Elena stood near the door and listened. "The Alpha King has made his offer to every struggling pack in the East," Elder Mara said. "Gold, land, or a blood bond through marriage. We have no gold left. Our land is poisoned. There is only one thing we have left to give." Every head in the room turned toward Elena. She did not cry. She did not argue. She walked to the table, placed both hands flat on the wood, and looked at each face one by one. "Tell me when the carriage arrives," she said. "I will be ready." Her father reached for her hand. She squeezed it once and walked out of the room before anyone could see the fear in her eyes. She had heard the stories about Alpha King Kale Drayson her whole life. Every wolf in the eastern lands had. He was said to have crushed 3 rival packs in a single night. He ruled from a fortress of black rock called Veyrath Keep, and no one who entered ever quite came home the same way they left. His eyes, people whispered, were silver and cold, like iron left out in winter. The carriage that came for her was black, trimmed in dark silver. It carried no flowers, no bright ribbon, nothing soft. Elena stepped inside with one small bag and watched her father's face disappear behind the trees. She told herself she was not afraid. She lied. Veyrath Keep rose from the earth like something that had always been there, and always would be. It was enormous, and utterly silent. The kind of silence that felt less like peace, and more like something waiting. Elena was shown to her chambers by a quiet handmaiden named Sable, who spoke in careful half-sentences and moved like a woman who had learned that stillness was safer than sound. The room was too large and too fine. The bed could have held 4 of her. The fireplace was the size of a doorway. Elena sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the stone ceiling and waited. At sundown, she met the Alpha King. He was larger than she expected, dark-haired, broad-shouldered, with a scar along the left side of his neck that disappeared beneath his collar. His eyes were silver. The stories had been right about that. They studied her without expression, without warmth, and without cruelty. That last part surprised her most. He sat across from her at a long table and spoke plainly. "This marriage is a political arrangement," he said. "I expect nothing from you that you are not willing to give. You will have your own rooms, freedom within the keep, and full access to its resources. Your pack will fall under Ironblood protection. That is my offer." Elena looked at him carefully. "And what do you expect in return?" "Nothing beyond your presence here," he said, "and your honesty." She studied his face for any sign of deception, and found none, so she agreed. They were married that same evening in a stone hall with 7 witnesses. No music, no flowers, just words spoken under a blood moon, and the quiet click of a silver bonding cuff locked around her wrist. She was now the mate of the Alpha King of the Ironblood Dominion. She spent the first weeks waiting for the cruelty to arrive. It did not. Kale did not crowd her. He did not ignore her either. Books appeared in her chambers that matched subjects she had mentioned once, briefly, in passing. The Eastern Garden was replanted with lavender one morning, without explanation. Sable told her later that the Alpha King had noticed her pause at a herb vendor's cart on her first visit to the market. Elena filed that information away carefully and said nothing. She spent her days learning the politics of the keep. She learned which lords respected power and which ones merely feared it. She learned which generals saw her as a threat and which saw her as nothing at all. She was sharper than most of them expected, and she used that surprise well. Small rooms of respect opened to her, one by one. In the evenings, she and Kale shared meals. He spoke rarely. When he did, his words were direct and without decoration. She found herself, slowly, speaking back in the same way. It was the most honest conversation she had shared with anyone outside her pack. She began to see the shape of him beneath the reputation. She saw the files he kept late at night, the records of pack resources and protection contracts, the careful notes on which territories needed what and when. She saw a man who had bent himself into something fearsome, because fear was the only currency the world had ever offered him. She did not know what to do with that, so she set it aside. The storm came on a Thursday night, hard and loud, rattling the stone corridors of the keep. Elena went searching for Sable, and took a wrong turn somewhere beneath the east wing. She pushed open a heavy door, expecting a storeroom. She found a child's room. It was small and old and untouched. A thin layer of dust covered the shelves, the carved wolves lined up in a row, the faded picture books with their soft, worn spines. Everything had been placed carefully once, long ago, and then left exactly as it was. Elena stepped inside. She did not know why. Something in the room felt familiar in a way she could not explain. Then she saw it. On the lowest shelf, between a carved gray wolf and a small painted box, sat a copper acorn pendant on a braided cord. Her copper acorn pendant. She had not seen it since she was 8 years old. She had lost it the night a group of rogue wolves attacked the edge of Ashwood territory. She remembered the fear, the cold ground, the sound of fighting in the dark. And she remembered the large gray wolf who had appeared and driven them off, who had then sat beside her in silence until her father came, and whose silver eyes had looked at her with something steady and calm before he disappeared into the trees. She had thought about that wolf for years. She had never known who he was. Elena picked up the pendant with both hands. She stood in the dusty room for a long time. Then she carried it to dinner. She set it on the table between them. Cale went very still. The silence stretched. Elena waited. Outside, the rain came down hard against the stone. "You were there," she said quietly. "That night, on the Ashwood border." He did not deny it. What came out slowly, over the next hour, was this. Cale had been 14. The son of the Ironblood general, running border territory on his own. He had heard the rogue wolves before he saw them, and moved toward the sound without thinking. He had driven them off. He had found a small girl with dark hair and a bleeding shoulder, who was too stubborn to cry, and he had sat with her in the dark until her pack came. Then he had left. He had no right to be on Ashwood land. His father would have punished him for the exposure. He had not thought of her often, but sometimes, over the years, he had thought of her. When the treaty marriages were proposed, he had not known she was the same girl. Not until she walked into his great hall with steady hands and burning eyes, and something in his chest moved in a way it had not moved in a very long time. He had not said anything because he did not know how, because saying it would have felt like claiming something that was not his to claim. Elena looked at the scar on his neck. She understood now. A rogue bite from that same night. She had not seen it happen, but she understood. She was furious. She was undone. She was also, underneath both of those things, something she did not have a name for yet. The crisis came 3 weeks later. A faction of northern lords, threatened by the Ironblood expansion into the eastern territories, chose Elena as their pressure point. They sent word, "Step back the expansion, or Ashwood Pack would face consequences." It was not a request. It was a warning wrapped in polite language. Cale moved to handle it the way he handled everything, alone, efficiently, with the weight of force behind every word. Elena walked out before he could. She went to the northern lords herself. She did not go with threats. She went with facts. She told them, calmly and clearly, what Ironblood protection had already done for the eastern packs. The resources quietly sent. The rogue attacks stopped before they reached Packland. The careful work of a king who ruled by fear because no one had ever shown him that anything else could hold. She did not give a speech. She told the truth, the way she always had. She looked each lord in the eye and said exactly what she saw, and what she saw was that they were afraid of something they did not understand. They backed down, not because of what she threatened, but because she did not threaten at all, because she saw through their performance, and they knew it. Cale found her afterward in the eastern garden. The lavender was in full bloom, soft and purple in the gray afternoon light. He stood a few feet away and looked at her, and for once, he did not look like a king at all. He looked like a person who had just watched something happen that he had not thought was possible. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "I know," she said. A long pause opened between them, the kind of pause that is not empty but full. He reached out and straightened the copper acorn pendant where it hung at her throat. She had worn it every day since the night he told her the truth. His hand was careful. She let him. And that was the whole of it. That small, ordinary, enormous thing. The Ashwood Pact territory was formally absorbed into Ironblood protection that winter. The poisoned land began, slowly, to heal. The river ran clearer. The trees held their leaves a little longer. The children stopped falling sick. Elena's father visited Veyrath Keep in the spring. He was gray-muzzled and walked carefully now, but he stood straight when he shook Cale's hand. He held it for a long time. He did not say much. He did not need to. Elena took a seat at the Ironblood Council, not as a quiet figure in the background, but as a voice, clear and fair, unafraid of the lords who had once dismissed her. She changed things slowly, in the way that things that are meant to last are always changed slowly. And Cale Drayson, Alpha King of the Ironblood Dominion, the wolf who had learned to make himself fearsome because the world had taught him that tenderness always costs something, began to let one person know him as something other than a king. Late one evening, Elena sat in the stone library with a book open in her lap. The fire was low and warm. Lavender from the garden drifted in through the cracked window. Cale sat across from her with a report in his hands that he had not looked at in nearly an hour. She did not point this out. He did not explain himself. They sat together in the quiet, in the ordinary light of a life that had found them twice, and both of them understood, without saying it, that this was exactly where they were supposed to be.